Hello again. This is Chad Everett Broshears, the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. And today's episode is going to be on emotional layers. Now, it's just become very apparent to me that there's a default way of viewing things because the way we discuss uh, emotions is we have a habit of discussing emotions as if they are, individually unique and isolated. And when you're happy, you're happy. When you're sad, you're sad. When you're in love, you're in love. And when you're, indifferent, there's a thing about it, as if it's sterile or solely based in that particular experience or expression. And it's become so very apparent to me that that's not really the way we experience life. We experience life with like layers of entanglement for different emotions. I mean, if you think about it, when you love somebody and you have the excitement level, or when you're um, when you're seeing somebody in the beginning, you have an excitement of a lot of different emotions that take place, right? You'll have experiences or excitement related to, like, there's the discovery of this person. So there's little that you know about them, but you do know that there is a level of mutual interest whenever it's in a somewhat healthy position. There's mutual interest. There's the excitement that comes with not knowing them and then being validated by how much they want or how much they desire you, and vice versa, how much you desire them. And then if it's continuation of the validation, that excitement continues to build and breed itself. But there's different ways of experiencing this stuff. So people can say, we have a default place where we say, yeah, I'm just happy. But if you tell me you're happy, I don't know exactly what you necessarily mean, without actually fully understanding what happy is to you, the definitive values that an individual holds to it, rather than an absolute value that everybody experiences it the same way. Blue is not blue to everyone, but we can unanimously agree whenever there's enough people in a room that blue is a color. Now, not necessarily all unanimously agreeing to that, but still a high predominance of it. So as I was sitting here considering everything with my recent situation that I've gone through, is there are so many different emotions that take place at the same time. Like with the ending of one particular situation or a relationship, and what actually is there whenever you find out certain things, or you realize that the reality you were living in is no longer the the actual current reality for both people or for multiple people involved in the situation. So I personally have realized that there was other things that came into play. In its rawest aspect, there was the insecurities and the lacking that I could potentially have from my partner, and that being the thing that actually drew my partner away from me and into a different position with another individual that provided that for that particular relationship, or for what that part of my partner was seeking. So it's interesting to actually be aware of, or be the witness to my emotions as they arose, and what I actually was openly willing to entertain versus what I was actually completely hijacked by. Now, whenever I say hijacked, it really is intended to come across just as it's stated. You will be hijacked at times in your life emotionally, sometimes consciously aware of it, and sometimes, and I would say most of the time, not so consciously aware of it. It takes a mature individual to recognize when they are being hijacked. Now, if you have something that is a deep-seated condition for you, like, there's people that have insecurities for like a lacking or a shortcoming, if you will. I know I personally have plenty of what I would consider to be shortcomings from my developmental position, where I actually once was in my life, and what I actually entertained as being a truth about myself. Not necessarily that I'm willing to completely accept that be a truth now, but it's in my fundamental development, in my background, in my foundation, if you will. Those kind of things, in my opinion, are very challenging to change or to grow out of. And it's arguable whether you actually are able to ever grow out of it. But to manage it is a different story. Now, if you were to actually put a contextual value, a term for that, the fundamentals of what actually is going on in the background of your mind, and its foundation is actually your background from what you have experienced in your life, how you chose the world, and reality is that what it occurs around you, what that means to you, how you decipher that occurring reality, and then that becomes your machinery. that machinery runs in the background. It's kind of a theme of how your life is. So if your life is riddled with insecurities and lacking or coming up short for certain things, then I would potentially argue that everyone has a degree of belief that there's something that they're short on or something that they lack. Now, whether they entertain that and create that as a character value about themselves is a different story. But not all of us had that kind of emotional, mental wherewithal to be able to tolerate the idea and defend against the idea at such a stage whenever we actually were introduced to it. And I'll give you a real life example out of my life that had me really position myself for a different reality. I was one in 6 boys. I have 5 other brothers, or had 5 other brothers. So with this, I was the second to youngest. I was the odd kid out, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, and nearly all of my brothers, and I say nearly because one of my brothers had passed before I was born. He passed at 3 years old from spinal meningitis. I want to say that he was about 3 years before I was born is when he passed. I may be off on that date, but he was my second. He was the third child. So, he was two kids over me. But again, like I said, he passed before I was born, so he was likely probably the most similar in the physical body. So I've been considered as being the black sheep of the family. So I actually, by that, I had to find ways of being able to be validated or valued by my parents and my authorities whenever my brothers or my siblings were around. I didn't want to be just forgotten, as I don't know many children that do want to be forgotten by their authorities. I think it's an evolutionary demand that we be notable enough to be cared for. But yeah, my brothers treated me in such a way to somewhat ostracize me because I did look different than them. Not significantly. There's a great deal of features that we share, but I was blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And my brothers were, well, all of them are pretty much, I believe all of them are brown-haired, brown-eyed. And there's different age groups too. I mean, different age brackets. There's, Michael and Adam are the oldest two. And then there were several years, and then Jason and Kevin, or Kevin and Jason, and then about 4 years, almost 4 years complete between Jason and myself. And then my younger brother is just under 2 years younger than I am. So with that, we had a different kind of hierarchy, but yet it's very similar to most families. But I was picked on a lot. I was challenged on my intellect, and I was stupid, especially by my younger brother, Craig. He would regularly rag on me and call me stupid. And then I would be ganged up on by both my older brother, Jason, and my younger brother, Craig, because how could it be that, the older brother is beating up the younger brother in the scenario of Craig versus myself? And Jason often didn't care much for that advantage, especially be it that I was kind of different than them. Just visually, much more different. So they used to pick on me, physically, pick fights. And so I learned to fight pretty well in a youth and with the neighborhood kids. But the emotional, psychological sides were different. I started showing a little bit more care towards my health and well-being that was taken into consideration by my father and utilized in his benefit, basically helping me develop the position of being a hypochondriac. It was easy to manipulate or to control a child whenever they're a hypochondriac, in the sense that if they're really being a nuisance, get them to think about their own health and well-being, and they'll stop the nuisance and become more quiet. I'd say that would be a little bit more of my father's intentions without being so, malice about it. I would say he was a little bit more just utilizing that to get me to not make his life any harder, be it that he was rearing so many children with my mother. But my brothers also picked on me about my intellect. And that had me really driven to develop what is known as being a strong suit, which I decided, and I recall the moment that I did this. My younger brother, Craig, and I were waiting at the bus stop at the end of our driveway. And Craig looked to me and said, we were being mean to each other, of course, is what his siblings do, right? So Craig looked at me and said, "You're stupid. You're just so stupid. You're never going to be smart. You're just stupid. And I told myself at that moment, because it really did, it cut me deep. And I told myself, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm not going to be stupid anymore. I don't want to be known as being stupid. So I'm going to do everything I can to be smart. So I went to school with that intention, and I spent a great deal of effort really buckling down on my math, the subject of math. And this was first grade. And I recall walking to school, or like walking to the class, just telling myself, I am going to be amazing. I'm just going to do such a great job with math. I'm just going to prove myself there, because my father also really enjoyed math. And it was not uncommon at all to find that we were doing, math equations when we'd take road trips and things. My father was very intelligent in many ways. And that's some of the ways he used to bond with us, is he'd have us think. He would make us think, rather than just let us be kids that did playful things that didn't necessarily involve, deep thought or, problem solving abilities, outside of some of the more mundane things. My father was definitely, he was a very intelligent man. But I told myself that I would be smart and I'd prove it. And one of my ways of proving it was focusing on how mathematically sound I was and how capable I was mathematically. So I spent a good deal of time focusing on that, and I got a better grade, and I rubbed that in my brother's face. And then the next grade came along, and I had already taken the foot off the pedal just a little bit. And the next grade wasn't quite as well, and that backfired on me. But I just really started focusing on how to make myself different than my brothers. So I focused on becoming intelligent, or what people would perceive as being intelligent, at a young age. Then it really started developing into who I was as a person, rather than a spiteful, I want to separate myself from the others and prove them wrong. And I really just started focusing on finding and satisfying challenges and understanding things more in depth. So I just told myself I'd be smart. And I spent time developing that. And in my 20s, I was sensitive about it. When I was finally at that point where I was viewed as being somewhat of an adult, and I wasn't necessarily acknowledged completely, but when I would put out intentions to be acknowledged, I would be, insulted if I wasn't. And I became sensitive about it. So it was some place that I could be hijacked in if somebody insulted me in such a way, or intended to, or if I took an insult that they did not intend, or they said something I made into an insult, but they didn't intend that in any way, I would potentially be very easy to hijack emotionally. And then my behaviors would follow along suit with, as if it were not my own behaviors. So emotionally, we have a lot of different experiences that aren't quite as simple or as sterile as saying I'm happy. And we all understand what happy is. We have different layers that tell us that we use to express something, but they're not unanimous, and they're not interchangeably absolute between each other. They're individual, because it's our best attempt to express our reality. So if I tell you that I'm sad, does that mean that I am likely provoked to violence, or am I provoked to retraction? Or what exactly does that mean to you if you hear that I'm sad? What does it mean to you that if you hear that I'm in lust, right? If you hear that I'm lusting after somebody, if I were to articulate it that way, what does that mean to you? It means, if I tell you that I'm excited, what does that mean? Exactly. They're interexchanged. They're layered. There's different ways of viewing this. There's different ways of articulating our experience. But so often that we just kind of default it and say, I'm upset. And what does upset look like? What is it like for others? What if I'm upset? And you're happy? Then what? What's the difference? What's the chasm between us? Could I be happy and upset at the same time? Can I be happy and mad at the same time? Can I be happy and joyful at the same time? Can I be joyful and sad? Could I be angry? and happy at the same time. Consider the last time that you were really upset. Was there a degree of satisfaction that came with being upset? What's also valuable, in my opinion, is we start actually creating definitions to these things, like actually using our own functional definition, not necessarily what Webster or any other dictatable direction would use as a definition, but in the sense of a unanimous concept or a larger population that agree upon a certain thing. But what about the individuals? What about the color blindedness, right? Or the expression of certain things? What if I tell you that I'm excited? What does that make you think? What's the layers of emotion that fall into your excitement? Now, if you only hear that I am excited, but you don't hear you if you read that I've written that I was excited, but you don't really have the full context to my excitement to or a larger context to my excitement, do you know what I mean? Or do you put yourself, your own experiences in that place and project that I mean what you think I'm from your experiences? Do you project it, or do you have enough evidence, enough information to understand what that means? So my curiosities they run deep. But with this, I've become aware that there's times in this recent relationship that it's, as it came to its own closing from what it once was, that I mean, there was a good deal of pain, there was a good deal of hurt, and there was a good deal of a lot of things. Some of those were absolutely not justifiable to project onto my partner as we separated from what we actually agreed upon. Some of those things were unjust to do so, but I didn't recognize it because I was hijacked at my own inadequacies in certain areas, my own shortcomings, as they become obvious to me. And to the degree of a reality that was stripped away, a reality that I was working on a daily basis towards creating. And what all combined, I came to this to a head in how I behaved upon putting all of these things in and being overwhelmed with different experiences or different emotional planes at the same time. Now, certain parts of me at its deepest points were actually excited. Other parts of me were devastated. I would say that there was a great deal more devastation than there was excitement. A great deal more of that. So emotions have different positions. There's different ways of expressing an emotion, but there's also layers of ways that that emotions are excited then. It's a fascinating thing to really start unpackaging this. To me, it's exciting. It's fascinating to unpackage this position. Because again, I've defaulted that, happy is happy, sad is sad. This isn't something that I actually had sat down and put thought into. I just kind of inherited that view. And then when somebody says that they're happy, then I know what they mean. When somebody says they're sad, I know what they mean. But the reality is that I really didn't know what they meant. I just knew what it meant for me to be happy or what it meant for me to be sad, and just kind of infected them with that position. I kind of just projected that opinion onto them, that viewpoint. How many times have you been in a conversation, you're like, oh, I completely get you. I absolutely get it. I know exactly what you mean. Totally get it. And then as they continue to expand on what they mean or what they're saying or what they're going through or what they intended to convey, you realize that what you thought they were actually saying isn't quite what was really being said. Consider that that happens to a lot of us a lot of the times. Communication is a key factor for the healthy direction for any relationship, not just one between, intimate partners to the most intimate degree of, like potential for marriage or whatever, but also in the sense that we're friends. But what does friends entail? What does it take to qualify me being your friend? Is it just a colloquial term that you use to identify somebody that you have a degree of affinity for, whether that degree of affinity is that you say hi between each elevator passing, or is it that that person is somebody that you would go out of your way to exchange resources or to offer your resources in order for that person to have an easier life? What does friend mean? What does acquaintance mean? What does lover mean? Really get like curious about these facets of your life and what we use to express ourselves. We enter into relationships with these presuppositions about the way things are supposed to go. And then we find out as we get into that relationship that there's differing understandings of the terms that we use, but yet we use these conversation pieces as if we totally get one another. Hardships don't all look the same, but you've heard other people going through hardships and you identified with that hardship that person's went through, and you've identified with your own hardship, and you pretty much kind of just assume that they are very similar to the same. A lot of the times in my experiences is that it was assumed that they were the same. I know what heartbreak is like. I've been through heartbreak. You said heartbreak, you use that term, you've chose that term, you're expressing yourself in a very similar way. Must mean the same. Must be the same. You must have the same coping mechanisms. So the last heartbreak, did you rush out to find somebody else to help ease the pain? Did you become reclusive? Did you isolate yourself from others? Did you just completely avoid the emotion? How about unemployment? How about when somebody challenges your integrity? Or there's so many different ways to actually put this into perspective, because not every single emotional state takes your attention. But a good deal do. But they take your attention in differing levels. It's a beautiful thing to understand and to actually bring on. Not everybody sees optimism the same way. Not everybody sees pessimism the same way. I'm regularly confused with people that think that people confuse me with thinking that I'm an optimist. And then when they hear me say that, they think immediately that I must be a pessimist. The reality is that I am what is situationally appropriate. If optimism is my best tool for surviving that moment and creating something else, then I might utilize that. If pessimism is the best tool at that moment for me to further my understanding and experience, then I might utilize pessimism. I might actually get to that point where I'm being pessimistic about something, not necessarily pessimism or optimism to the extent of actually being identified as that being who I am as a character or who I am as a person. But you must understand that with these come their associated behavioral, emotional expressions. Optimism is usually associated with happy. Pessimism is usually associated with sad. Doesn't mean that it's true. Just means that they're associated because it's just common. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Anyway, so I've gone on for just a bit about this. I hope that this video and this recording and this episode has brought a little bit of enlightenment to positions, emotional layers. I really cannot, and I have strained over thinking about what a sterile experience of happy is. Like a definable, that is exactly it, without actually adding in other emotional experiences, other planes of understanding or viewpoints or experience, excitation or whatever it may be. Like, not all excitement has, completely sterile positions against, not having danger. Danger being present brings a good deal of opportunity for excitement for a lot of people. So with all of that being said, I hope that this has been something to get your mind working. If anything else, and I hope that my series sparks interest in thinking. That's something I enjoy. That's a reward for me. So when I hear that has brought thought to you, I feel that I've actually made a difference to a degree. It doesn't need to be a difference for the positive, nor the negative. It could just be something different from what you've experienced before without necessarily having a cognifier. Polarity. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I do hope that you have found this to be a benefit, to stick with me for the time that I've actually rambled on about this, or that I've expressed myself. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. So with that, please feel free to share this. You can share it wherever you want. You can comment. I would love to hear back from you. Facebook, Gmail, G+, Google+. There's many different places to actually share. Comment, subscribe. By all means, please subscribe. More people I see subscribe to the channel, the more I know that at least you'll have notifications when these videos come up, and the more likely that you might actually jump into the chat room and start to exchange some ideas with me. It's fun to have these conversations, but a lot of the times I feel like I'm having them alone. And that's fine. It's an interesting position to know that I can entertain myself in a conversation this long. But again, thank you guys very much for watching, listening. I look forward to your feedback and to the next show. Again, this is Chad Everett Brochures. I am I'm the host of Growing Up in the Wilds of Suburbia. And I look forward to our next video. Enjoy the rest of your day.